What's going on, everybody? It's me, Ryan to the Monson, here for another episode of the Classic Buffalo Podcast, the podcast that interviews everyday people just like you, listener. Let their story be heard. That's what we do. We interview you. We talk about what you're passionate about. What have you gone through? All the things surrounding mental health. Because some people have experienced it and some people haven't. And in this case, James Kittipol, our guest, he experienced some stuff. And we're going to go through that in today's episode. A guy who was born and kind of raised in Thailand, came to America, went to college with me. We had some experiences. Our experiences overlapped a little bit. And we talk about things that he's been through with his family, what it's like growing up in another country that's not America, what it's like to struggle, what it's like to be happy for the first time, what it's like to have to deal with the stigma around video games, a lot of different types of stuff, guys. It's a really wonderful present of an episode, I believe. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode with James Kittipol, Book 65. Here we go. Joining me this wonderful Sunday is the magical, magnificent James Kittipol. What's up, man?
Hey, man, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Good, dude. Sniffling. It's time for allergy season, not the virus, baby.
Whenever it's humid and whenever the weather goes from cold to not cold, I'm not allergic to anything, but for whatever reason, when the weather fluctuates, my body clock tends to have a riot, to say the least.
Oh, I'm the same way. So you're in Indy though, right?
Correct.
Okay. Because we'll talk about this later on the podcast, but were you kind of born, were you born in Thailand, or were you born in California, went back to Thailand, where are you originally from?
Just to set the record straight, I guess,
Yeah.
once for all, I was born and raised in Thailand. So Bangkok, Thailand, March 9th, 1995, grew up there, spent 18 years. So
Oh, wow, okay.
all primary school, high school there. And then for college, that's pretty much the first big time spent in America.
All right, man. Well, we're going to do a first 5 questions, kind of some icebreakers, get you moving and grooving. Would you rather wear sweatpants forever or never wear them ever again?
I'm a luxury over fashion guy. I'll gladly take something that's more comfortable. If you're smart about it, there are ways to make sweatpants look just as dapper, just as good as any other form of pants. It just depends on how creative you can get. But yeah, given the choice, I'd rather go with that.
Loose fit or tight fit? Or both? You'd be able to...
It would fluctuate. I guess for sports, I'd want it to be loose, but not that loose. So it's a happy medium. I think the thing for me right now is I like it to be a little tighter. I get the blood circulation going a little better. Quite like the mid-2000s where everything was baggy. Everything was jean co. Everything was along that.
Well, it's because you play basketball. And I feel like if you had tight sweatpants, that would be advantageous versus a loose fit. So that way you don't trip. Because, you're a fast player. You can go between your legs a little bit. So it's I feel like I couldn't do it. I'd have to have tight fitting or else I'd eat it.
Tight fitting for me, there are so many different applications.
We should just talk about sweatpants for the next hour. That's what we do.
I could, man. People give me flack in college. We went to a school filled with I felt like it was jeans and then freaking khakis.
It wasn't exactly exploratory in the fashion world.
Yeah, I mean, sweatpants I feel had a negative stigma at where we went to school.
Yeah, lazy.
Yeah, you were either lazy, you were a freshman, or you probably didn't date anybody, or if you dated somebody, man, your standards have dropped.
Right, yeah.
None of the following for me. It's all comfort.
Who is on your NBA Mount Rushmore?
You've got to have MJ. You've got to have LeBron. Number 1 and number 2. It's easier to do starting 5. Oh, I can give an answer to both. I feel like starting 5, you'd have to go with a different type of MJ at the point. You'd have to go with Magic just because of how much he contributed to the game. him and Larry basically drove the league out of a bad financial situation, right?
Yep.
They were the story that catapulted the NBA as we knew it from the 70s to the 80s, and then from the 80s to the 90s, you know? So MJ, you got to put there. Jordan, obviously, at the 2, the greatest shooting guard ever. At the 3, you'd have to put LeBron James, the best small forward ever. Like, it's somewhat disputable, but at the same time, it's not, just because of how much he does and how much he brings to the table, the mogul he is. At the 4 position, I'd have Tim Duncan.
Did you think that Tim Duncan was better than David Robinson, the guy that he replaced?
100%. It's not like he's that much better, but just everything that he brought, his overall leadership, and which he inherited from David Robinson for sure. Tim Duncan, just the ultimate sacrifice leader that he was,
Right.
and the fact that he was just he was a double machine. It's a common saying, but he really was. Anything on the court he could do. The reason the Spurs lost that pivotal 2013 game, you know, the one that Ray Allen hit the shot.
Yeah.
Pop, for whatever reason, decided Timmy needed to be out in the final minutes of the game.
Why?
I have no idea, man.
As a Heat fan, I guess I would be pretty happy about that. But logistically, as a basketball, like just aficionado, that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah. Because the game was pretty much set in stone, but yeah.
Yeah.
And at the 5, here's where it gets a little disputable for me, though, because 5, who do you want? Do you want to overtly physical? You can go with Shaq. Do you want someone that scores a lot? Do you want someone like Kareem who can give you a solid backing on both ends, but is maybe a little frail? Frail is a very loose term here. I'm going to have to go with Hakeem at that point. As far as Mount Rushmore goes, I think Jordan, LeBron, Magic Johnson, and then at the number 4, you probably have to put in you could say Kobe.
I was thinking that. The only reason, not necessarily because he's one of the best players, but just because of the way that everything has happened in the last few years.
You know, when it comes to Mount Rushmore, I just think of players that have not only skill-wise, but just like as a mogul, what they've done for sports, what they've done for basketball, what they've done beyond sports. All 4 of these guys have contributed in ways that, you know, it's led us to where we are today, you know, especially in basketball.
What is your motto or piece of advice that you live by, or something someone told you that, yeah, that's actually really good advice?
I guess the motto that I go with right now is just move as God would move you. My life up until this point and beyond has been about constant movement from place to place. A lot of these places that I've been to, most of the time it won't make sense in the moment. And I know it's a very cliche saying, but for me, it's applicable because of just the sheer amount of places and experiences that I've had that I never thought I would have at 18.
Yeah.
You know, as an 18-year-old, all that was in my head was what I saw in front of me. You know,
Right.
But now at 25, I see an open valley of possibilities if you allow him to lead you there. You know?
This is a dumb question, and may be related to geography or something like that. But like in Thailand, like you spent 18 years there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the amount of traveling you can do, it's not islands, right? Like that's the Philippines.
No. Yeah. Bangkok is a big city. It's a ginormous city, and you can go from one outskirt to the other and see a totally different landmass, different geography, different typography. You name it, it's different. Thailand is fairly big. It's about the size of California and maybe certain parts of Oregon put together. It's a coastal kind of country. You can go from mountains to beaches.
Man.
It would take you a good 2 or 3 hours by plane to get to each, though. So it's a fairly it's a small country, but it's not that small. You know,
Yeah.
It's not like Singapore where you could potentially jog around the country.
The reason why I brought that up is because when I went to Scotland and England for the first time, I think like I had traveled to Toronto before. I had traveled to, it's more like I've traveled across the country of the United States, which is pretty big, but it's kind of like when you get even outside of your own country, that's when it's like, oh, the world's actually pretty big.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. The first time I landed in Indy 7 years ago, I had the biggest culture shock. Just I had never seen flat for miles and miles around. It was the first time. This was my first go around, and maybe didn't help that Luke Bryan was on the radio. Like
Oh,
the first time me and my mom, we rented a car. And the first thing I hear when we turn on the radio is just, I think Luke Bryan was singing about a truck and hunting and fishing for fish in the Flint River or whatnot. It's just, oh man, a world of difference. Traveling it's a thing in Thailand. People can go all over. It's a big enough country that you can go from one landmass to another, and it'll take hours and hours to get there. The way roads are in Bangkok and the way roads work in Thailand is not like the U.S. You know, it's not a grid system. It goes up and down. And you know, I know not all the U.S. is perfect, but Thailand, it's just, not only are you battling the geography of the area, you're also battling the horrific driving situations that we are thankfully spared of here, unless you go to certain parts of LA.
Number 4, what is the conspiracy theory that you actually believe in?
I think drum cages in churches. There's an inner movement amongst churches to get all drums inside cages by 2020 or 2021 or whatever.
What?
Whatever church doesn't have a drum cage in it, it will have it by a certain day.
Okay.
And the reason I don't hold to that, but the reason there's that gnawing thought in my head is because every church I've been to in America, starting 2015, every church has a drum cage.
So does that just mean that it's an enclosed drummer, basically?
Yeah, enclosure.
Okay.
Which for a lot of churches I get. Churches that have not a whole lot of space, it can get very, very loud, like unbearably loud. Where I have an issue with it is some churches get it thinking it'll sound better inside the cage. I know of no other live scenario, not even bars that I know, any live concert setting that puts drums inside an enclosure.
That's the captivity we need to be talking about with Carol Baskin going on.
Yeah. Oh God, here we go again. But drums inside cages. It's a silly thing that I have going on. I realize, for recording purposes, it's great. These companies that supply drum cages, their main source of income are churches. Take that with a grain of salt as you will, but yeah, that's my theory. That's my one conspiracy theory.
Sam Ash Lutheran Church down the street.
Sooner or later, they're going to get a drum cage. If they get a drummer, they're going to get a drum cage.
Hey, you want to go to my church? Oh, where's it at? That's at Sam Ash, or it's like at a guitar store.
If it's implemented well, aka not like the school we went to, it usually works out fine. I'll leave it at that.
What's your secret talent that most people might not know that you have?
I have very, very sensitive hearing, and this probably counts because only my family knows it. Water dropping in my toilet, even though the door's closed and I'm in my bed, I can hear it. Or a story, according to them, when I was a baby, my aunt, she was with me upstairs. I was a baby. My uncle sneezed downstairs, and according to her, I started to cry.
Oh boy.
From my room as a kid, dogs bark and motorcycles go by. And usually when you hear a vehicle approach your building, approach your house or whatnot, usually means someone's coming home or whatnot. And so anytime my mom, as a kid, my mom would always say, I would always go check the door, even if I heard a dog bark, to see if my dad came home.
Dude, that's probably some evolutionary trait, like your ancestors or something like that, where we need to track this animal, and then great James Kittipol puts his ear to the ground to find where the antelope are.
A certain scene from Lord of the Rings comes to mind. It's that scene of Aragorn just putting his ear to the grass as they run up on top of the hill. Yeah, I don't know, man. I wish I could track animals. That's also my secret talent, is I get bothered by certain audio quips. Like if a professor at school plays a video but doesn't exactly have the volume loud enough, but when you do raise the volume, it's just pure white noise. Oh.
Sweet. Well, you passed the first 5, man. All right, dude, let's get into your story. Let's go day 1. Where are you at? You said you're from Bangkok, but kind of talk about what was the family dynamic, big family, small family, close, what's the culture like in Thailand?
I guess the easiest way to talk about growing up in Bangkok is maybe talking about the delay of technology that was available to us. Anybody who's 25 at this point is at the tail end of people that grew up without the internet. So I guess that's one major influence that I can think of growing up in Bangkok, because Bangkok, for the most part, growing up without the internet up until a certain age, you know, high school or middle school. I got a phone at age, I want to say 13, but it was, you know, it was a Nokia flip phone. It was a
All right, that's when I got one. Okay.
glorious Nokia flip phone that had Bluetooth capabilities, so you could send songs to people under certain aliases. You know, you'd have like Bluetooth names for each other. Then you'd have to turn it off if you didn't want people to send you some files you didn't want. So my dad was the main breadwinner of the family, which meant he had to go to work for most of my childhood, which meant that my mom was at home raising me and my sister. So because of that, here's a little story about my mom. She was a refugee from the Vietnamese War that had bordered into Laos. So in a big nutshell version of the story, her family was relocated. They had to relocate to Thailand for a few years. Then they were off to the United States because my grandma worked as a nurse in the American consulate in the American war camps in Thailand. Because my grandpa was a citizen of Thailand, you know, he was Thai, and then my grandma was Laotian. They were able to go into the country without any prosecution, which also meant that they weren't citizens of the country. So because of that, they were able to move and relocate to the United States, which is a really tough ordeal for the family. But, you know, thank God they are where they are today, which is why I frequent California, which is why my side of the family that is in America is in California, is because of that, is because in about the mid 60s to late 70s, you saw a huge influx of Southeast Asians move to America. It's because of that very reason. Other than education, other than career pursuits or anything, above all else, you saw a huge movement in that area, at least that I'm aware of. Being in America at such a young age and being raised there, going to high school there, meeting my dad there, who went there for education. He was born and raised in Thailand, went there for education, was one of the only people in his family, probably no, I take it back, the only person in his family to study abroad of his immediate family at the time, which is incredible. Yeah, met my mom at a Thai Baptist church in San Rafael, California. Had me in 1995. No, and it's because of that that I know English the way I do. Wow. I speak the way I do is because my mom grew up in America, which meant that when we were at home, she would only really speak English with us. And then when dad came home, he would speak Thai with us. You know, it's how I'm able to be bilingual. Most of the people I know will claim that I'm not very good at Thai. And that definitely isn't helped by spending 7 or so years in America and only going back for a little bit. But yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's why I am the way I am. Probably the biggest influence is the fact that I grew up speaking 2 languages, primarily English. Like I would honestly consider English my first language, but by osmosis and then by just my dad and the family, I've also along the way picked up Thai. So
that's why you're like a Golden State Warriors fan. Like
correct.
Okay.
There is a deep history. In fact, like I think the year that they moved there, the Warriors were already playing in Oakland. Because at one point they were playing in San Francisco, but in 75, the year that they won it for the first time in San Francisco and in the Bay Area, they were already playing in Oakland at the time. So when my family moved, they moved to this place called Berkeley, California, which is right next to UC Berkeley. You know, because when you think San Francisco, you think just the city, but then there's the Bay Bridge that connects East Bay, California with San Francisco, and then you got all the surrounding islands, San Rafael, you got the San Mateo Bridge. When people give me flack for being a Warriors fan, it's just the funniest thing ever. It has to be the funniest thing ever because
You didn't plan that.
No, I didn't plan that. And on top of that, it's still weird today to see people wearing either Steph Curry gear, Klay Thompson gear, or just anything Warriors. I'd never imagined that they would be that good. Even, and the big shocker was, a story to that would be throughout college, I got to go back in the summer. And one time while I was coming home from, going out or whatnot, I saw somebody they were wearing a Steph Curry jersey. I was like, whoa. And this was back in 2014 when he hadn't had his big boom yet. I'm like, man, this could be pretty gnarly. But I guess back to Bangkok, it may as well have been a completely different world as far as the technology distribution between, I guess, Thailand and America. You can't really use Asia as a barometer for that because, I mean, you got places like Japan, China, Singapore that are all very, very technologically advanced, but Thailand, I think, was very behind up until a certain point in the mid 2000s that started to change. Because we had dial-up internet. You ever had dial-up internet? Yeah. So internet where a little kid couldn't easily, access it. But in 2005 was the first time I think my dad had a broadband, like actual internet connection. And from there, like I feel like Thailand has gone at the speed of light. At one point in 2013 or whatnot, Thailand had the most Facebook users per capita, like by percentage, which is a huge increase in a span of a little over 10 years. Thailand has become, Bangkok in particular, became very technologically advanced. So,
right. Did you ever play like some of the earlier? Because you said you kind of have access to internet in the mid 2000s. Did you play like RuneScape?
No. So yeah,
like, what were your like first games?
Disney interactive games. These kind of action 2D platformer Disney games, so Tarzan Interactive, which was like this 2D platformer Tarzan. It would run through the events of the movies. It would have cutscenes of the movies. You ever played Croc or Croc 2?
I've heard of that one. I probably have, but I can't remember.
The story behind it is it's a knockoff. Like Nintendo was supposed to do like a Mario 64, but for Yoshi. But the project was scrapped, and so their assets were kind of up in the air. And so Fox Studios at the time, they took the project under their own helm and they renamed it Croc. It's like a 3D platformer that just has this derpy looking crocodile running around and stomping on people. It's honestly amazing. It's not the greatest game, but it was my first entry in the video games and platformers. But no, video games, where it all started for me, where I can really trace it. I guess in second grade, I was doing a lot of activities. I was doing music classes. It's violin classes, Kumon, which is like an after-school kind of Japanese math program.
Whoa.
And I was very bombarded by it. My parents' idea was to like fill my schedule so that I would never get bored. But every Saturday, we just have these different places to go to. Like I'd do violin in the morning, piano after that, then Kumon after that. I was the very stereotypical kind of Asian thing. You get all the bases covered. As a reward for that, and maybe as a reward as a motivator to get me to study a little more, to keep me going. One day, I got in the car. My mom placed this anthology pack, this thing in my lap, and I'll never forget it. It's this big box, and on it, it said Half-Life Platinum Collection. Oh man, talk about something that no second grader should ever be playing. In it had Half-Life, obviously, Opposing Force, Half-Life Blue Shift, and Counter-Strike. And I was so excited for it because I'd seen people playing Counter-Strike everywhere. Counter-Strike was very big. I didn't even know Half-Life existed. I mean, in second grade, no internet. You don't know anything, So when they placed that in my lap, it was like, whoa. People take it for granted now, just how easy it is to get video games to work. Even games that don't exist anymore on the market, you have to kind of torrent it, or you have to go through the black market to get it, or backwards compatibility or whatnot. All fixable because there are patches that come out today, right? Video games back in the day, when you just have the system that your dad has, it's just something maybe not meant for entertainment, but you push it to its absolute limit just to get a game to work was amazing. So when I finally booted those CDs in, I found out very quickly I couldn't play Counter-Strike because I didn't have a form of internet that would support it. What does a little kid have to do next? Took another CD and I put it in, and it was Half-Life. Half-Life 1 in 2002. This is a good 4 years after the game came out. And looking back on it now, I think the reason my parents got it, one, was because it was already fairly cheap at that point. In anticipation for Half-Life 2, I think Valve released their big anthology pack of everything they'd had up until that point, minus Team Fortress. And it blew me away. It's like it blew anyone else away, but especially as a kid, young, impressionable James just looking at, the game's giving me a crowbar. Whoa, I can move around in it. I can dissect the human body. I can just make it go splat. I can shoot a scientist whenever I want, even though that's not advisable in the game. And the crazy part about Half-Life is that it doesn't take you away from the perspective of the player. It's the first game really to go from beginning to end, first person. The character doesn't talk. Whatever the character is going through is projected through your consciousness. In Half-Life, that's what catapulted nights wasted in college.
One thing that's just I've noticed for myself is like I love video games, but because I am at risk for depression and anxiety, a lot of times if I'm like, oh, I'm playing video games, I should be talking with people and I should be doing this and that. And I think there's some merit to it because like that's the adult in me trying to make sure I don't go into oblivion, like that I don't just become a complete hermit. But at the same time, I'm like, I haven't played video games in forever, and I do enjoy those. And I think with the coronavirus stuff, like this is a way I'm connecting with my friends now because I can't see them. So we're on the mics playing Call of Duty Warzone, or we're playing, I know some people are still doing League of Legends, like which is always, that's never been not popular. I feel like with multiplayer games now, like because we can't see our friends, like Discord, like where you can talk and chat with people, like Zoom, like what we're doing now, like where we could see and talk with each other. And then if we were to play any game, like video games has just taken like the front seat, I feel like, in a way that we can connect with people, at least most recently, or I don't know. It's always been kind of a cool thing in my life.
Those are great points that you bring up. That's funny that you mention it. It's funny that you mentioned the effect that the coronavirus has had on gaming. Because guess what? Last month, for the first time, I made a Twitch. Well, I had a Twitch account, but I never streamed. Purely out of boredom. I've always wanted to play this game. Why not make it streamable? Why not share it at least with my immediate friend group? Because I never going into it thinking that I want to be big on Twitch or anything like that. The whole point of streaming games or Twitch or any YouTube gaming or whatnot that is now coming to light, is now coming to fruition, that people are now starting to see. Jimmy Kimmel, he made a joke about why would you want to watch somebody play a video game when you can play it for yourself?
Yeah.
First of all, there are a multitude of reasons someone would want to watch a video game. One, some people don't have the means to play those video games. Like, for example, prime example, Half-Life Alyx just came out. That's a VR-only game. Well, guess what? VR, to run virtual reality on your computer, it's quite the investment to be able to play any game like that, right? And so some people want to see games played at their absolute ultra setting. So there is that. They want to experience it through maybe a skilled player, or there are plenty of accounts online where people just no commentary, play throughout the entire game. It's like you're experiencing it vicariously through other people, which is not, if they could play the game, they would, but they're in a situation that they can't, and it's just, I still want to have this experience, and the video game companies don't have an issue with this at all. It's because they realize it's free advertising.
Yep.
But the main reason you watch other people play video games, it's kind of like you hanging out with them.
Yeah.
It's the classic, go over to your cousin's house and play video games. Well, right now you can't go to your cousin's house. Right now you can't go to grandma's house and, use that good or bad internet. You can't go over and play that board game you want to. Well, guess what? There are board games online. And there are mechanisms that allow us to now traverse and have that whole great social experience online. Even for me, I'm a pretty avid gamer. There is a difference between single-player games and multiplayer games. For me, my body pretty much lets me know, okay, I think this is about enough. If I feel like I need to go to sleep, or I feel like I need to eat, I feel like I need to work out, I feel like I need to be active or whatnot, my body does a fairly good job. But, I'm not devoid of the social anxiety and depression that being alone brings, especially with video games. Co-op video games, it's a great experience because you're always talking with people, and especially if you're playing with your best friends, it's a good form of stress relief, even if you're playing a fairly competitive game like League, like Counter-Strike or whatnot. But for me, video games are art. They serve pretty much the same purpose as a book does. Some people will find that blasphemous. Same form of entertainment / artistic value that a movie can bring, because you are experiencing it for yourself. a video game, I want to get lost in that world. I want to get lost into what people have poured hours and hours into, just like making and crafting. You know, it's a different form of art.
What are you playing that you're like, oh man, this is like I love this game because X, Y, Z?
The game that I am streaming right now is called Ori and the Will of the Wisps. It's a 2D platformer. It kind of harkens back to the subgenre is called Metroidvania. It's two games, Super Metroid and Castlevania, put together, Metroidvania. So 2D platformers as we know them today, and the first game being Ori and the Blind Forest, the most beautiful animation in like a platformer or game that I've ever seen. It's just, it's so beautiful. It's like playing a Studio Ghibli movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's if you're looking for, and they're cheap. Borderlands 3 is something I'm actively playing all the time. The Borderlands franchise.
Is that the new one? Is that new?
Yeah, 3 is the new one. 3 came out last year, and so the
Okay, I
DLCs.
gotta get that one. I'm on Legend of Zelda: The Breath of the Wild. That's like 3 or 4 years old, but I still just got it.
Oh, it's the same. My sister she just got a Switch for herself, and I'm so happy that she has a Switch now. It's because she before I was the only one in the family that could defend video games against my mom. My mom is just always, oh, you're 25, even at 18, you're 18, you're still playing video games. I'm like, Mom, you're 40 something, but you're still watching movies. You know, it's just at this point it has become a very different thing.
Would you change it the way you were raised or kind of like the way you grew up? Were you pretty happy with that?
Everything that my parents did, they did to better our lives, I will say. They gave everything up. First of all, the school that I went to, the International Community School of Bangkok, it's a Christian private school. It's among these slew of international schools that are kind of expensive and pricey to go to. And so a study recently came out showing how many Toyota Corollas, Toyota cars one could buy from year kindergarten to senior year, which is what most of these international schools run on, right? They go from K-12 all the way through senior year. So it's not like you went to a different school for primary school or middle school or high school, right? So yeah, in that regard, I'm truly grateful because I looked at my school, they could have bought 12 cars. And that's just the cost of tuition alone. That's why I think the way that I think when people get married and have kids, and it's just such a big responsibility, and I'm eternally grateful for what my parents provided. The one thing I would have changed is my sleeping habits.
Okay.
My sleeping habits and my lack of interest in drinking milk, because I am not 6 foot. If I had to go back and tell James one thing, hey man, sleep a little more. Actually listen to your parents' advice. You know, sleep a little more, grow as much as you can. Your gene pool isn't that strong anyway as far as growing, but you need to fuel that fire, you know, because I knew a lot of kids that had short parents, but grew up taller than me because they weren't like me. They didn't stay up till whenever. A kid should be sleeping at about 10 or 9. I was a bad kid in that regard, and that's why I'm 5'6" today. 5'6", 5'7". You know, we make mistakes and we learn from it. It's the greatest teacher.
Let's go to high school. Like, are you playing music? Because I know, like, that's kind of what you went to Taylor for, sort of.
So correction there, I actually wanted to go to Taylor for their film program, and rightfully so, because they had at the time they had a rising film program, and even to today, shameless plug, their film program has no reason for it to be the program that it is. But because of John and Kathy Bruner, because of what they bring to that team, you have people working in industry jobs that people wouldn't otherwise be doing.
Yeah, they're the heads of the department, right?
Yeah, and the first year that I got there, they had red cameras. They bought 2 red Epics. For people that don't know film, that's the camera they used to shoot the Hobbit movies. That's the camera they used to shoot the Amazing Spider-Man at the time, or Pirates of the Caribbean. Amazing. It's a big investment, and for a small Christian college to invest that much money, it's amazing. So yeah, I wanted to go to Taylor for that reason. Music in high school. 7th grade, I mean, you become a teenager, 13, 12, you're impressionable. So along comes this Christian rock concert / music festival called Spirit West Coast. And that takes place in California. You know, this was one of the summers that we would spend in America. We would just do a bunch of things. We go to basketball camps, go to different church camps, reconnect with my parents' friends. And one of those experiences that I had, and this was the summer of 2007, was Spirit West Coast. And my first non-classical concert was this Christian rock band called Red. By comparison to pop music, they're pretty hard, you know, hard, crunchy type of guitars. And that whole festival, I remember that festival, we went to go see Lecrae. There were about 50 people in front of at his tent.
Wow.
There were about 50 people watching Lecrae. And because it was a hip-hop at the time, at least in the Christian scene, wasn't big.
Oh, yeah.
In the mid-2000s, it was all, Hawk Nelson, Family Force 5, Cutlass, Skillet. You name it, hard rock was it, or metal rock was it. But, yeah, Lecrae was there. But all to say, that it was a really impactful festival in my life because it was the first time I'd ever heard music played quite like that. Because up until then, as I mentioned before, I took music lessons as a kid. So I started piano at about age 5. I started violin, which I don't play anymore. Piano, drums, and saxophone. That's what and bass. That's what I can play. I'm best at piano and drums. Bass is a third tier. But music in high school. So yeah, I was heavily influenced by that rock concert festival. So obviously my first phase, other than classical music, because I was classically trained since 5, was rock. So going to high school, it was all rock. Like I had 2 friends that I would regularly jam with. That sort of led my my dad and several others that I went to church with. They started to see that, hey, this kid can play a little bit. Why don't we put him on the worship team? My dad was the one recommending me to do it because he would traditionally always keep me away from the drum set at church. Because as a kid, when you let the kids loose after church, they kind of run wild. They kind of run rampant. And me, I always went up to the drum set and I would bang just like any other kid, just like start banging, and it would, loud commotion with him. My dad he'd always give me the death stare. And so when I started to take drum lessons at 13, I went to my parents. I asked, I've taken piano for this many years. I want to try drums. And just a look of sheer horror on my mom and dad's face at the time, because they didn't know what it meant. The parents, they don't know if their kids actually want to do things or not. But for whatever reason, drums, I wanted to. I really, really wanted to learn drums, and I really wanted to just play the drums. It's a fun instrument. Going into high school, yeah, it was mainly rock. I mainly played for the worship team. There was a youth kind of worship band at school that I happened to play for starting freshman year. I played for the orchestra, the wind ensemble at the school that I went to, and I also played for the jazz band.
Dang, okay.
Yeah, so everything you could think of musically besides playing for plays, yeah, I did in high school. It was an amazing time because you had all those spheres of music kind of melding together, right? You had pop radio. In Thailand, pop radio at the time was anything that was top 40 in America. It's mostly the way it is now. But then it was a little more streamlined. It was a little more direct to which songs people were listening to. So in 2008, when Step Up 2 came out, and the Flo Rida song, the freaking Low, T-Pain Low.
Yeah, yeah.
That was may have been a little too big for its own good. But in time, we were blasting it everywhere. And, Chris Brown's With You song, to no credit of my own, it's completely to my surroundings that I have the quote unquote eclectic music taste that I have, is because I grew up with everything. You saw hard rock and hard music more commercially available, like Korn and Linkin Park, Paramore, Breaking Benjamin. These bands that were a little hard, they were still in the mainstream circle. That influenced me. Then when I entered jazz band, the professor and my uncle, but they both kind of recommended that I go listen to Miles Davis and Dave Brubeck, Hillsong United at the time.
Yeah, in the Christian circles, you're like, yeah, they slap. Hillsong slaps.
Yeah, a lot of it informed the way that I viewed music in high school, and which is how I view music today. It's all just, none of it is really bad. Yeah. There's this stigma, I think, going around today that people have, music today isn't as good as it was before. Well, that's what people were saying about the period that you're referring to.
Why Taylor?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't even considering Taylor. Like it hadn't even come across my radar until a person, I'll credit her right now, Dorothy Wadman. She was the wife of my JV basketball coach. She just kind of casually mentioned that I should apply to Taylor because she went there. And what do you have to understand about my school back home is a bunch of my teachers are Christians. They're Christians that are highly educated Christians that come from the general Midwest. So any, Cedarville, Liberty University, I know that's not Midwest, but like Christian colleges, right? And a lot of people in my class were applying to different Christian colleges. So I'm like, okay, I'll add it to the list that I'm applying to, Greenville College, Biola, Azusa, and Taylor. And Taylor was the only school to accept me on a provisional and an international scholarship. I was not a good high school student by any means, which may be reflected in how long it took me to finish college.
Did you ever get shit for that?
They were in my corner because junior year, it cost me my ability to play varsity basketball. Such a waking point in my life that, hey, I might need to take this way more seriously. Like I had to forego junior year varsity basketball, which, to a kid, to a teenager, that's killer. And then up until that point, I hadn't made it yet. This was the year I was supposed to make it. This is the year I'm going in with my, 2 or 3 guys that, because JV is, acts as a development league. This is the year we finally get in. And it just never came, because my grades were so poor, it just never came to fruition. So my friends really supported me. Segue off that, ironically, of all the schools that I applied to, Taylor had the highest GPA, like average/requirement. So it's funny. Of all, the guy that didn't do well in high school, and this is all God's doing, of all the schools that I applied to, the one that was quote unquote most prestigious grade-wise accepted me. Okay, God, clear sign. Right. And then I look at the location, Indiana. I'm like, oh boy, I've never been anywhere east of California.
Which is most of the United States.
Which is all of the United States.
Yeah, right.
I'm eternally grateful for it now. Jeez.
Yeah. So let's talk about college. Like, kind of just walk us through a couple moments or things that kind of stood out.
Freshman year was probably the weirdest. It's the year 2013, 2014. 2 years that I look back on now with the most kind of fondness, but that when I was going through it at the time wasn't the most fun. Because it was my first year alone in America, right? Just being by myself. Granted, I knew the language. I knew the culture, internet, YouTube and everything had informed me what I needed to know, all the references,
right.
Nickelodeon Kids or whatever the kids in college were talking about, I sort of knew, which felt weird. It felt like I shouldn't have known because I came from a different country. Right before I left for college, my dad, he went in for a checkup and they found that he had stage 3 colon cancer.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And freshman year, I spent the majority of freshman year thinking at any point, I'm going to get a call saying, hey, James, you may want to come home. Dad's not going to be with us for much longer. Yeah, and that was a struggle. That was really a struggle. And that's why my mom dropped me off. It was supposed to be my dad. It was honestly supposed to be the both of them because my dad couldn't travel. It was, my mom took me, and God bless her. It was a really tough time transitioning to Taylor. The overwhelming guilt that I had just being helpless, and also the guilt of, so he's struggling health-wise, life-wise. I'm not able to help him, and I'm thriving off of the situation, and I'm in a college. It was a tough time, but, praise God today, he didn't have to go through radiation. He had to do the surgery, and he had to, do chemotherapy, but not radiation. And so because of that, none of his immune systems were harmed in any way throughout the process, which is usually what kills people. When you go through radiation, your immune system is compromised. Therefore, anything that enters your body, it's a death sentence for most people. But praise God, my dad was cleared about a year after he got diagnosed.
Oh, wow.
Cleared 100%. And so he goes in every 3 months for a checkup, and it's just since then every day has been a gift between me and my dad.
Did you see a change in his behavior or anything like that? Like, through that process to now, like ever since then?
I did not recognize my dad when he was first diagnosed, because this is a man I get my personality from, man. He's very, if you think I'm extroverted, which I am not, anytime I take those tests, I'm either an I or an E. It's always back and forth. It's never just one consistent. Yeah. My dad is a solid E. He's a capital E with a ton of exclamation marks behind it. My mom is a lowercase I with just like a ... after it. Two different personalities kind of melding together, creating me. My dad, he's a Christian businessman. He's a preacher. He does all these different things. And when he was diagnosed, I had never seen him quite that depressed. I had never seen him quite that somber. It was weird because and at the time, I couldn't get why he didn't want people to know. And that, a lot of that, I think, also has to do with Asian culture. There's this movie that came out, this brilliant Asian movie that came out that talked about it. It's called The Farewell, and it has Awkwafina in it. It's about her grandma getting cancer and them not wanting to tell her. It's kind of reverse psychology because my dad's Thai Chinese. He, for a good 2 weeks after the surgery, was very kind of secretive about it. He didn't want me to tell anybody. And that was really messing with me, like really, really messing with me because I'd never seen him like that. It was a period in which God was speaking to us, like, times of adversity is times that he is at the forefront the most. Like I said, every day has been a blessing. And at every chance he gets, my dad will tell you that cancer at this point is the best thing that happened to his life. It's crazy now because before he had cancer, it was, he was kind of working up a belly, and he is getting old now. But I remember just in the years after he was diagnosed and after he had cleared chemotherapy, the dude was rocking a six-pack. The dude was healthy. He was shooting hoops. I'd never seen him shoot hoops when I was a kid. We had a hoop in my driveway or in our driveway or whatnot. I was really the only one shooting on it. My dad would never join me. Fast forward to going home for college, he would always nudge me to go out and shoot with him.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and so his life completely changed, mostly for the better because of cancer. And it's crazy to say that now, but he has a totally new perspective on life, and I am very grateful. But it was a hard time, especially in college. It was very difficult. Let's talk about Indiana for a second, right? Just the culture shock that Indiana, and I can't even put Indiana in that category. Just Upland, Indiana is weird to most Midwesterners. Even the most seasoned Midwesterner will go to Upland, Indiana and tell you, yeah, this place is a little nuts. There is a clear bubble that Taylor exists in, and right outside that bubble is extreme hurt, is extreme poverty, hurt, like drugs. I mean, Marion might as well be the meth capital of the world, right? Inner city Marion.
It's not good.
And that's where I went to church, Pentecostal church that I played for. What a world of difference, man. Before the plane even landed, I looked at my mom. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I looked at my mom, and at the back of my head, I kind of wondered, does this school really exist? Or is this one of those, like, sorry, you got scammed. Now you're working in a factory now. You have to understand, man, city boy, Bangkok, and then my only impression of America was San Francisco. So in my all small 18-year-old mind thought, you know what? I bet the rest of America is kind of like this too. Oh, man. So driving up to Indiana, it's just like country. And then I just remember the first night that I spent in Indiana was the Best Western right behind Cracker Barrel.
Yep.
Yeah, just like, well, we're here now. There's no turning back.
Right.
Which is what a lot of kids feel whenever it doesn't even have to be Indiana in general, when they come to study in the U.S., despite how academically talented they are. Especially if they don't know the language as well. That's what they deal with. And I say deal loosely is because it is a privilege to study in the U.S. But yeah, it's just some of the things that go through your brain, just the simplest ways you do things, like finding out that people like to use toilet paper here more than, which is very topical at the moment.
Right, yeah. I thought about doing a giveaway for Vintage Indie, like just giving away toilet paper, like just one roll. They're like, no way, everybody like got a raffle for this.
You know what I'm giving away right now, if I could build an economy on it, would be, oh gosh, here I go. If my friends listen to this, they're going to get me on this, but I invested in a bidet. There's a $50 one. You know what that is? Yeah, you know what it is. $50 one off Amazon. It's not the greatest one.
Oh, it's like a homemade you just install? You just install it?
Yeah, it's still automated, so it isn't the super soaker that people think it is.
It's the super soaker.
Oh, man. I call it the super soaker because the one I grew up with, even low-income houses in Thailand have it. The drainage system or the water system doesn't work any other way. There's a water pipe right there. So there are ways to manipulate it, and so that use water to clean. There are different versions of bidets. There's the Japanese one that talks to you, that plays.
What?
I'm dead serious, man. You go to Japan, there's some really nice ones, and people have them shipped to their house and they have a plumber come do it for them. They set it up for them. But
Wow.
the one I grew up with was you had to squeeze. It was like shooting a gun. Hey man, it got the job done is all I'm saying.
Yeah,
But no,
right,
the one I
yeah.
have is automated. So it's kind of like the Japanese one, but it's just pressure. It's pressure automated. So you turn the knob one way and the water will come out.
Wow.
And it's honestly been
That's the
the most
future.
valuable purchase of 2020 as of currently. And I did not get it because of coronavirus. I got it because my friend was telling me to get it. And
Okay.
I thought to myself, it's been 7 years. Finally, after all this time, it's time. So I did. That was a major adjustment going to Taylor. No toilet, no bidets. I had to get efficient.
Didn't you change your major?
3 times. Film to English education. Because I think along the way I sort of discovered that this is hindsight now, looking back and me observing and saying that although I liked film, I didn't love it. I didn't have the motivation to chase it the way it's meant to be chased. I looked at my skill sets and and this was after a summer of coaching and working with kids. I'm like, I like working with kids. I'm pretty good in English. I'll combine the two together. Boy, was I in for a wrong one. There's so much more to teaching than that. And so that didn't work out. I did that for half a year. But what resulted from that was, okay, so I already have a bunch of English classes racked up. I may as well, since education wasn't working out, I dropped the education and I just did English for till I graduated. So English creative writing ended up being the degree that I graduated with. And then towards the end, when I decided to go back and finish college, it suddenly dawned on me. I don't know why it took me so long, Ryan. I don't know why it took me so long. All those hours just watching sports, I never thought to put the two together. I never thought to put writing and in sports together.
Yeah.
And so without hesitation, I signed up for this sports writing class my last semester at Taylor. And then I somehow became a beat writer for the Echo. Back to back. I'd only taken one journalism class before, and I did not do well in it. It was media writing. It was a requirement for film at the time. In college, I wish I could have had this state of mind to become conscious of whatever I was learning, even though I don't have an immediate use for it at the time. Sports journalism, that's the path that I'm pursuing now, and I'll leave it open. I'll see where that goes, but that's currently where I'm trying to go.
Did you want to go back to California, to Thailand? Like, why are you
Indy.
here? You can stay. Why did you want to stay?
I have an idea of where I might move if and when God opens that door. But for me, I never thought I'd be living in Indiana. I never thought I'd be living in the Midwest. After spending so much time here building my connection base out in the Midwest and anywhere east of California, it's like, man, I've spent all this time building and just getting to know people. It'd be a waste now for me to go home. First off, my parents, I think my parents urged me to stay out here, and they urged me just to seek my own career, not go home, not settle for a teaching job, just teaching English back home or whatnot, even though they highly encourage it. And I heard it said once by Chris Holtman, who spoke for the 2017 commencement. He's the Ohio State basketball coach, former Taylor alum. And he said something along the lines of, if you had to choose between career and knowing people, specifically pertaining to people graduating and moving to places, right? He said to prioritize people. And honestly, I couldn't agree with him more. Like, friends that have supported me in my decision to be here, and just the sheer amount of people that are still living in Indy. It's like college 2.0, but better. I now can drink and do different things, and have and actually work for a living. So yeah, and it's cheap, Ryan. It's moving to San Francisco or California.
Times 3.
I'd be homeless.
I'd be homeless.
Or I'd have to live, and I wouldn't have a problem with it. But it's just like, I'm a man. People should be individual past a certain age. I'm not putting any pressure on people. For me, this is the path that is in front of me right now, and Indy has been very, very good to me.
What has been your experience like with mental health? I know we kind of talked a little bit about your dad going through somewhat of depression, but like, have you personally
for me, what I've always found helpful is to always pinpoint, okay, exactly what is the source of what I'm feeling right now. In the earlier parts of college, it was easy. You know, for me, it was, oh, it's my dad. You know, it's the fact that he's dealing with this. I'm angry at God. Angry at God. And let me say, it is okay to be angry with him. You know, this is the God that created the universe. You don't think he can take a few, like, you don't think he can take your emotions? He can. Pinpointing isn't always, like, it isn't always possible because there's a huge science aspect that I'm not aware of. Brain chemical imbalance thing that goes way over my head that I will not pretend to be an expert on. You remember me freshman year? I was an angry, feisty, very insecure kid. You know, like everyone's insecure. Man, my insecurity was ramped up to 1,000. Everything contributed to being new, being afraid. A lot of people come up with different names for it, but I was afraid. I remember the first, we rode into Upland. I saw David Neal on a go-kart or on a golf cart or whatnot. He looked at our cart, and I got intimidated by that, dude. I'm like, oh, man, that guy has a really sharp gaze. And just like all these different things that contributed to my insecurity. And so you would sometimes see that. And because of that, I was very hypersensitive. And I mentioned before I was sensitive hearing. Oh, man, freshman year and sophomore year, I was very uptight. I couldn't take jokes. It was the first time that I wasn't the majority. I couldn't laugh at myself. I was very uptight just about everything. And that's when you're in a dorm full of horny / impressionable college guys, they're going to break you in that regard. Playing basketball was a good source of stress reliever for that. But even then, like when I competed against other people, it's like my anger came out in some really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Dude, my anger and my problems with my family came out in intramurals.
It's not exactly the worst thing because we're lucky in that regard. We're lucky. I'm lucky that I had, and I'll credit him, Josh Karp. I think my biggest thing is people in your life. Surround yourself with people that you may necessarily disagree with, but will tell you the truth unflinching, without flinching. And Josh Karp, I remember one day when I was just particularly angry. I heard things that weren't being said. I thought these girls were saying my dick was small because they were cheering on. We were playing against Sammy 2. It was just intramurals.
Yeah,
holy crap! Sam. I didn't realize Sammy 2 was that good. There were some players on their team that should have been playing for Taylor, but weren't because they, Taylor is home to a lot of really good ball players that just decided, you know what? I don't want to do this college sport thing. I'm just going to do this for fun. And there are a lot of great ballers. And so as a result, we were getting killed. And these girls they were kind of jabbing, I guess, with one of our guys. But it was all in good-natured fun. But me, being the insecure self, I heard a bunch of things. And it was to the point where I was almost about to be violent. I almost was about to use what I know to like hurt some of these girls.
Yeah.
And as a man, there's a code that you don't cross. And the guys, I was just out of control. Josh took me aside after that, and he said, and he had to pull me out of the gym. This is freshman year James. James now I'll run away, dude. Swearing a lot, swearing way more than I swear now. Just profanity, like loud at the top of my lungs profanity whenever I didn't make a shot or anything like that. It's just, intramurals. Josh took me aside and he said, James, the next time you do this, I am going to call the cops. Like, there is no way you should be talking the way you were talking to those girls. There's no way. There's no way that your actions should have led you to that point, that you should have taken that kind of action, that you thought that response was necessary in that regard. You're talking about one of the most influential moments in college. That changed my life. He may not remember it. Just
that's life, though, dude. That's
Yeah.
Sometimes like you just affect people, and then you'll just never know that person had a moment that could totally turn everything around.
Josh Karp, he was just an influence. He was a magnetic personality for some people, and him and Ryan France. They don't remember it, but they kept me in check. They were They kept me accountable. They always checked me anytime I said a curse word.
There's
And
nothing inherently wrong with it. It's the fact that they could tell that there was a deeper intention behind it.
yeah,
There was a rooted problem that they could help you fix. It wasn't
yeah.
the fact that you were cursing necessarily, but probably, I mean, I don't know, maybe it was that it had an issue with. But I feel like knowing both of those people, like they could see that there is a deeper issue there, and they wanted to help you kind of with that.
Yeah. And if you think about it, I am sort of the tail end. I'm really lucky to have been surrounded by the people that I have, because there are people in this world that have my emotions and are ramped up to a whole new level of violence, a whole new level of like responding to how they interact with people. You know, it's how you get homeless people. It's how you get people that end up in jail. It's how you get people that unfortunately also commit suicides because they have no way to cope. And accountability was what kind of saw me through, even though it was, you know, Derek Kamwesa, if you remember him.
Yeah.
You were playing basketball in the morning. I was D'ing up Skip Trudeau, Professor Skip, Dr. Trudeau. I may have gone.
Kind of explain his role. Like what was Derek and what was Skip's role?
Right. So Derek, he knew I liked basketball, you know, and he always invited me to play this really needlessly in the morning, like absurdly in the morning basketball that typically professors and staff members go to because they have to get through their stuff for the rest of the day. There was this one Wednesday that I went, this was a sophomore year, that I was playing defense against. I happened to be matched up with Skip, who is...
He's like the dean of students,
he's
right?
like he's the
hammer. He's
the freaking hammer, man. He was kind of getting in my face a little bit, like, dude, stop fouling me out. I'm not even remotely close to how physical I am with other people. So the game went on. He kept ramping up that energy. And I think I was playing a little too hard on him. He and I almost got into a fight. Dead-on fight. Like, me and the dean of students. Like, really? It was this old guy, too. He's short. Like, I couldn't run circles around him and everything. It's just, now I feel really bad about it. But Derek was there to witness it all. And I left that court just, like, fuming. I went into the bathroom, punching the bathroom walls and like punching and everything. I screamed to the point where the janitor came in and said, "Hey, are you okay?" They could hear it from the weight room. And I'm really letting everybody know about my anger issues. But yeah, but Derek, here's another clear example of someone who was kind enough, who had God's grace and mercy and peace of mind to reach out to me and say, "Hey, man, this isn't right. How you're dealing with this isn't right. Your pent-up emotions." Having the emotions is one thing, but having the conviction of those emotions to act accordingly, it's a different level. And yeah, I'm just so thankful that someone like Derek was there to counsel me through it, you know, because on top of that, bad grades, you know, he was the guy that kind of kept me in line as well. Like, hey, man, I need to see that you're communicating with your professors, you know. A lot of people that are in depression or have anxiety, they have people that listen in, but it's not, the people don't actually live it with them. The people don't actually bear it in the moment, grit your teeth, and like bear it with them. These people did with me. They did that and then more, which is what a lot of people need. Most, if not all, people with these kinds of issues, myself included, we won't project that out into the world. We don't want to be that vulnerable because we're already vulnerable.
What advice would you give, let's say, to someone who's in a similar position to you, but maybe doesn't have that person?
You have to always think in retrospect. You know, what are my actions today? How are they informing what I'm going to do tomorrow? Because we are all creatures of habit. What am I putting in place right now? What is my mindset going into this? And how will that affect me going forward? And you can always use your past as an example. But I guess the one thing I would say, Justin Keys, you probably know who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I saw on his wall, and it really, really resonated with me. And he said, "Your past is a lesson. It's not a life sentence." And so for people that are deeply, way more impacted by their past than I am, yeah, I'd like them to know that there's a reason it's behind you, you know. And if you're currently dealing with something right now, if it's a result of something that has happened in the past, like for me, if in my case, I did badly in college to the point where I didn't graduate with my class. Hindsight, a lot of people graduate late. A lot of people do different, you know, they go different routes. But I felt guilt. I felt a lot of guilt in that. And for a long time, I let that hinder how I went about my
current lifestyle, how I went about finding jobs, how I went about talking to people. I would always clarify, like, no, actually I was supposed to graduate in 2017. And, all these minor adjustments to my past that don't matter anymore. Your past, although it's a lesson, it's not a life sentence. You do not have to live by that standard. You do not have to, you can go whatever direction you want. And hopefully it's the direction that leads you closer to God, Number 2, and only, I'll keep it at number 2, is just do your best to surround yourself with people. It's a cliche saying. It's a cliche thing, because the school that we went to, what was the go-to phrase?
Intentional community.
Intentional community. A word I got so sick of. It just, whenever I'd hear it, it had such a visceral reaction to, like, I would almost kind of mock it, as a lot of students did. But oddly enough, it's still true in my life. Community is intentional, and community isn't just the people you live with anymore. Now it's anybody who's across the online forum from you. You're being intentional about it. The fact that it was a catchphrase in college doesn't change the fact that it's actually a real thing. You have to be intentional about who you communicate with. If you are in a sphere of influence that you feel deep down is derogatory to you, I feel for you. I really do feel for you. Find people that will tell you the truth, and then find people that will continue to encourage you, not falsely. There's people that encourage you, but, give you compliments. But then there's people that enrich you and tell you the truth, the undaunting, painful truth.
Yeah. All right, man, we're going to wrap up here.
Okay.
What I want to do is we're going to do the final 5. Number 1, what is the best thing you can do in the coronavirus stuff?
What are you doing now that will build bridges for you in the future, build bridges for you tomorrow? Corona could end, or it could not end. Your best course of action is to take action, is to not let it rock you. You use it. You don't let it use you.
Number 2, what is your favorite part about yourself?
I like that I like to listen. Even though I've spent the majority of this thing talking, I really, really do like to listen to a lot of different people, even if I disagree with them.
Have you ever gotten complimented on that?
I wouldn't say listening, but I think people have kind of noticed how much information I remember. I wouldn't say it's autobiographical, and I wouldn't say it's quote unquote photographic memory, as the science community would put it. But when it comes to detail about people's lives, it's important. It's what gets them to talk to you. Hey man, do you remember that one professor that he always looked at me when he talked about Asian people? Yeah, that guy. Or just details, little kind of sensory details that I pick up on that probably everybody else picks up on, but I have the gall to talk about, even if it's meaningless.
Would you rather be able to tell what people are thinking about or see their futures?
I'd rather be able to tell what people are thinking about. Time is just something I would never, as a human, I'd never mess with. It just never ends well. All those movies, man, it never ends well.
Number 4, if you could go to dinner with anyone in the world that's alive, who would you go with?
It's a great question, but right off the top of my head, you probably already know this. He's my favorite athlete ever, currently. Both
Steve
currently
Kerr.
and Steph, well.
Steve Kerr. No, Steph Curry. What?
Steve Kerr would be great just to hear all the stories, but Steph, just because,
Yeah.
he's a cool guy. Yeah,
Yeah, he's a cool
he's
guy.
a cool guy. He's a great guy to hang around. Well, he seems like a good guy to hang around. Is the dinner to, enhance yourself, or is it just to enjoy yourself?
Just enjoy it. Yeah.
Just enjoy Steph, easily.
Yeah.
Or Draymond if I want to get a little wild, but
Draymond makes an appearance. He's kind of swinging by.
Draymond makes an appearance.
Last one. What is your proudest moment of yourself?
There's this moment in college that I learned to laugh at myself, to not take myself seriously. It was the moment that I let go of a lot of insecurities that I had. It's why I can be the way I am today, and I'm not, that moment in college where I let go of a lot of those insecurities and learn to just learn to laugh. I sound like the Joker.
What I want to do now is I want you to pick a person who has impacted your life. Shout out Janice from 8th grade for getting me into basketball, whatever you want. But you're going to share this part of the podcast with them so they can kind of get a little nugget of encouragement. But take as long as you want and kind of encourage a person.
You talk about Indy, why I'm in Indy. Ryan Simplinski, man. He took me in right after graduation. I told him, I didn't have a place yet. I didn't have a place lined up yet. I had roommates that I wanted to live with, which fell through. I had to get a single bedroom apartment, but it was a good month with no strings attached. Just said, hey man, you can crash on my couch. You can stay here until you find a place. And, he was the guy that drove me around, drove me to my new place, helped me move in. And along that token, also Beans, also Sir Helmsley, the guy who
Joe Helms.
Yeah, Joe Helms worked with very briefly at a coffee shop for about 4 months. And anytime he and I worked together, he would always drive me home because I didn't have a car. And I'm eternally thankful for that.
Well, it means a lot, man, for you to be on here to just be supporting Classic Buffalo. Even if one person's life has changed, even if it's
I've been checking out Classic Buffalo. You've had some cool guests on.
Yeah,
been nice.
I think it's cool. I love doing it, man. Goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, y'all. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for checking Classic Buffalo out.
Hey everybody, this is Ryan from the Classic Buffalo podcast. Wanted to take a second to talk about Anchor, how I'm actually making this podcast happen. Super happy that I'm partnering with them. So, Anchor is actually the easiest way to make a podcast. I've done my research. This is basically the best way. I promise. It's going to give you everything you need in one place for free, which is the best part. It's going to have tools, so you don't really need a fancy schmancy recording guy. Anchor's going to be helping you out there, and then they're going to distribute the podcast everywhere to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, everything. And then you can also make money with basically no minimum listenership, which is kind of rare. So hop on Anchor as soon as you can. Thanks. And that is the episode. Thank you so much for listening, person. Couple of updates that I want to give to you before you go. Tonight, or maybe, well, it's not tonight, it's tomorrow. I'm losing track of days already. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, we are having a Discord session once again. Please feel free to join those. We're trying to build a support community. If you follow this podcast, follow Classic Buffalo as a whole. Love me, love being even a supporter for people. And you're not a part of the Discord already, or if you are, join it. It's basically just audio or visual, whatever you want. You could be anonymous if you want, but it's real good. We share what's been going on the last week. If you want to process something, you can, and you'll get positive feedback. It's great. I love it. A couple people have shown up so far, and it's just been a great experience. So if you'd like to do that, please DM me on Instagram for the Discord link if you're already a part of the Discord. But if you are, shout out, join, hop into the session. So that'd be great. But thank you so much to James for being a part of this episode. Him and I have a unique relationship. We went to college together, and it just was kind of cool. I never really sat down with him before while we were in college. We were always playing basketball together or talking about video games or doing something on the floor together. We never really just sat down and had a conversation. And I was pleasantly surprised, just to hear about the things that James went through and just things that after I left, because he was younger than me, after I left, what happened at Taylor and what he's been doing now. And it's just been kind of cool to see how his passions and how his trajectory of life has changed so much, from music to sports journalism to this to that and all kinds of stuff. And it's just kind of cool to see him grow in that way. And James is just, my relationship with him has always been very surface level, but always fun and great. And, I felt like other people, maybe even on our floor, either misrepresented him or didn't understand him, or that it was a unknown gem in some ways, and that James is, a lot of people are like that. People are like that, just people are great people. And other people don't realize that value, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not valuable. Just people just aren't good at realizing gold is gold. Maybe some people are shitty gold analyzers and we're all gold. I don't know. Somewhat of a loose metaphor, but it's kind of applicable, right? If you're a valuable person and somebody doesn't know the value of something. For example, this happens in my vintage stuff. You know, one person could look and say, oh, that's just a t-shirt. Whereas me, because I know it's the stitching on the shirt, because of the tag, because of this, because of that, I'm like, oh, that's a $50 shirt. That's a $100 shirt. I'm right. Or I could be closer than someone go, oh, that's a $2 shirt. That's just a, you know, it just, people who are informed and have the eye can tell. But if a lot of people say, oh, that's not valuable, that's not a valuable person, they're this or that, they don't read into it, they don't know what they're talking about, that person could believe that they're not valuable. But, you know, in this case, James is a very valuable person. And it was just interesting to see, to talk about somebody who's grown up in another country for the majority of their life and then now come to America, the land of opportunity, the free and the brave. And, you know, James eventually starts to feel happy, but at the same time feels guilty because of what his dad's going through, you know? And sometimes, like, I think it's important to check yourself, right? Like, have a check-in with yourself and say, like, what situation's going on where I'm actually doing really well? For example, I'm sure a lot of people during COVID, if they're doing really well, feel guilty about that. Or they're thriving or they're being successful, but they're like, oh, these other people are dying or financially burdened or unemployed. And I don't have really the answer to that, but as to how to feel about that, like that correct ratio of empathy and just gratitude and grateful for things being good while there's still other things that are going bad. You know, how do you do that? How do you balance that? But, you know, there's just interesting to hear how James was finally finding his place. But it's like, oh man, am I supposed to be happy right now? Like, things are bad in these other areas. And even for me personally, like in this other area, am I allowed to be happy? Maybe we are. Maybe we are allowed to be happy. Just because someone close to us or someone we know is not doing very well. And maybe we're supposed to be happy in that moment for that specific thing, but we're also allowed to be sad for something else. You know, this whole idea, I think it's somewhat loosely related, but I'll go into it anyway, of like that we're not allowed to have pain towards something, to have guilt, to have, I guess it's sort of like that my pain that I'm going through is worth feeling like it's pain. For example, one of my friends was arrested. I think if I have mentioned this on the podcast, ignore this. But one of my friends got arrested during the protests that have been going on recently with George Floyd. And in that process, she experienced what it was like to go to jail and what it was like to, and I think I'll talk to her about this because I think she wants to be on the podcast and we can talk about that experience. But she was struggling so heavily with that because, yeah, it's a really shitty situation. And like having to go to jail and experience the bad things that could happen there. And it's not all sunshine and rainbows and stuff, right? But she felt bad because she knows that people of color have experienced much worse than what she experienced. So she felt guilty for feeling like she couldn't process. She's not allowed to be like, oh my God, what happened to me shouldn't have happened, or this was unjust because other people have it worse. Other people have gone through worse. And that sucks, right? That we have to compare our suffering or our problems to other people. And that should there should be some universal gauge as to whether you're allowed to be sad or upset over something. That sucks, right? And so in James's case, it's kind of like, are you allowed to be equally joyful that your life is going great and you're fitting in and you're exploring yourself and you're going through college, which is supposed to be this fun time. But then at the same time, my dad's not doing very well, you know, and someone very close to me is suffering. And am I allowed to be happy? You know, I think that's a valid question. It's somewhat related, but hopefully that makes sense. But, you know, James is a really good guy. He's got his good head on his shoulders. And if you're in the Indy area, you know, or you know James, reach out to him and show him some love. You know, wish him all the best in the sports journalism stuff. I think he started his own podcast very recently, probably after we had recorded, but about the time that I'm releasing this episode. I think it's called The Crunchy Take. So go check that out if you're into sports or if you're into podcasting and stuff like that. Or like, I don't know, you like you feel like you'd like James's sports talks. He's informed. He's a good guy. He knows. He's not just like a guy who's like, this team's the best, and then he doesn't have anything to say, based on that. He's a smart person when it comes to that. So maybe you hop on there and get a new podcast to listen to. Take a quick sip break. Yeah. Let me think if there's anything else. I think. Yeah, the Discord stuff was just an interesting experience. We had our first meeting this past week, and just going to keep going. And if people keep wanting to be a part of it, great. If you guys don't, it's still worth it for me to try. I had a conversation with the president of NAMI, which was awesome. The NAMI, Indiana, more specifically. They each have one in each state, but they're like the National American Mental Health Institute. And that went really well, and that just kind of opened my eyes to some things and potential opportunities. And it just was a really good step, and I left that conversation feeling really motivated. I might talk more about plans going forward with that, but it just, I'm going to continue, and I think I've mentioned this before, talking with counselors and talking with like head honchos who are a part of the mental health industry, getting to know what holes in care there are, get to know what their experiences are, what their organization is doing specifically to tackle the mental health issues that we're all dealing with here. So just starting on the road, a lot of good things going on. But yeah, if you'd like to be like James and share your story, talk about your honey business, talk about your anxiety, your depression, your mental health struggles, people someone you lost, your business you're trying to start, your photography, you're scared of moving out of your parents' house to go to LA because you want to go start something. I don't know. If you want to talk about something, hit me up. We'll get you on the pod. So. But yeah, it's been another episode of Classic Buffalo, and I'm your host with the most. Or with a little, with some. I have enough. There you go. We'll talk soon, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode, and there'll be another one next week. See ya.